You say you want love, but when someone gets too close, why do you suddenly pull away? Maybe the problem isn't that you don't want connection. Maybe you've learned that vulnerability was dangerous. There are many ingredients required for a healthy relationship: communication, trust, boundaries, and more. But one of the core ingredients for a healthy relationship is vulnerability. Because if you're not vulnerable with another person, whether in a platonic or romantic relationship, you cannot truly experience intimacy or build a deep connection. You may be connected, but only on a surface level. So in this video, we will talk about what vulnerability is, why we are afraid of being vulnerable, how this fear is formed, how it shows up in our lives, and most importantly, how to overcome it. If you're struggling with this fear, remember, you're not alone. So what does it mean to be vulnerable? Being vulnerable means consciously choosing to share your authentic self, including your flaws, your fears, your emotions with others, even when doing so carries the risk of rejection or hurt. The opposite of being vulnerable is choosing appearance of safety over expression of reality. Vulnerability requires emotional honesty. It means expressing your true emotions instead of masking them. For example, if you feel hurt because you felt ignored, being vulnerable means communicating that to the other person and saying, I felt ignored and that hurt me. Masking, on the other hand, means protecting yourself instead of expressing what you truly feel. It can show up as anger, trying to control the other person, withdrawing emotionally, or suppressing your feelings altogether. Vulnerability also requires accepting that people might not respond exactly how you hope, opening the door to the possibility of being hurt. Vulnerability is often mistaken for weakness, but in truth, genuine vulnerability demands immense amount of strength and courage, and it is not the same as oversharing or trauma dumping or revealing deeply personal experiences without boundaries or intention. I've noticed that a lot of people nowadays are afraid of being vulnerable, myself included. We often avoid emotional openness because it feels unsafe or even threatening. But when I realized that this fear was preventing me from feeling deeply connected to others and was affecting my relationships, it pushed me to go deeper into it and understand where this fear actually comes from. We develop this fear as a response to the environment where emotional truth felt unsafe. So we form these adaptive identities that don't let you actually feel connected to other people, even yourself, because you're wearing masks instead of connecting your true self with another person. We don't all avoid vulnerability in the same way. Some of us overthink it, some of us suppress it, some of us control everything around it. But underneath every mask is the same desire: to be loved without being hurt. I will name a few of the masks that we develop to protect ourselves from being vulnerable and feeling hurt. One of them is intellectualization. Intellectualization is when you turn emotions into analysis. Instead of feeling what is happening inside you, you try to explain it, dissect it, or philosophize it. For example, you might be feeling pain, and instead of sitting with that pain, you try to understand, why is this happening? You might say, this is probably due to attachment patterns, or this is a psychological response. But in that process, the emotional experience itself is never fully felt. The mind understands the pain, but the body is never allowed to feel it. You're trying to think your way out of an emotion, and this in the long run is gonna make you disconnected from your emotions. You're gonna have a hard time labeling your emotions, understanding why they are appearing, because emotions are clues or signals that tell you exactly what's going on and where you should go next. Intellectualization says, let me explain it. instead of feeling it. Or if I understand it fully, I don't have to experience it fully. The emotion underneath is discomfort with raw emotions that gets translated into thinking. The second mask that we develop to protect ourselves from the fear of being vulnerable is perfectionism. Perfectionism is the attempt to build or project a flawless image of yourself. It is when you believe consciously or unconsciously, I need to be better, more successful, more composed, more attractive, so I am safe in love. This mask is often rooted in conditional acceptance in early life, where love or approval was given based on performance, behavior, achievement, or how well you met expectations. Over time, the nervous system begins to internalize a belief that being enough as you are is not safe or sufficient. So perfectionism becomes a form of emotional protection. If I can be perfect, I can reduce the risk of rejection. If I can avoid mistakes, I can avoid criticism. If I can always appear composed, I will not be exposed as inadequate or unworthy. But beneath it, there is often a quiet fear. If someone sees my flaws, they might stop loving me. And so you keep improving, refining, and achieving, not only from ambition, but from a deeper need to secure love through performance. The paradox is that perfectionism may create admiration, but it often blocks intimacy because intimacy requires being seen beyond the image. The third mask that we develop is hyper-independence. It is when you refuse to rely on anyone emotionally, and internally you begin to believe, I don't need anyone. I can do everything by myself. But underneath that belief, there is often a fear of depending on others and being disappointed. This mask is often formed in childhood when emotional support was inconsistent or unavailable. When a child cannot rely on their caregivers to soothe, to regulate, or hold their emotions, they begin to learn that safety comes from self-reliance. As an adult, that survival strategy continues. There is a quiet fear that if you depend on someone, you will be let down, misunderstood, or become a burden. So to protect yourself from that possibility, you become emotionally self-sufficient, not because you truly want isolation, but because dependence once felt unsafe. And what once protected you from being disappointed slowly becomes what keeps you from being held. There are many other masks we develop to avoid vulnerability and protect ourselves. If you want me to go deeper into them, let me know in the comments. Some of these include people-pleasing, emotional distancing or detachment, humor or deflection, emotional withholding, emotional suppression, and control. So how do we overcome this fear? The first step is to recognize its hidden cost and begin to see its value. When the mind has been trained to perceive vulnerability as a threat, it will naturally resist it and prevent you from opening up to others. Overcoming this begins by gently rewiring that perception and understanding that vulnerability is not a weakness, but courage in action. Just because people in the past did not hold your vulnerability with care does not mean you must abandon it entirely. At the core, we all desire to be loved, to be seen and supported. But how can someone truly love you for who you are if they never get to meet your real self? If you only show the polished version of yourself, the composed, controlled, everything is fine version, then connection remains limited to the surface. In that sense, you end up depriving yourself of the very experience you are longing for, real love. Instead of seeing vulnerability as a threat, begin to see it as a foundation, a necessary building block for deep, healthy, and meaningful relationships. The second step is attunement. Learn to recognize your internal emotional states, name them accurately, and express them in a healthy way. This can begin with journaling, reflecting on your emotional responses, and gradually learning how to communicate them with others. The third step is what we can call calibrated or gradual vulnerability. This means opening up slowly with people who have demonstrated trustworthiness. You might begin by sharing something personal, a fear, a worry, or an emotional truth with a friend or a partner, and observing how they respond. If they respond with understanding rather than judgment, you begin to gather evidence that vulnerability in the right relationships is safe. And over time, your nervous system starts to unlearn that belief that openness leads to harm. So if you want love, real love, the kind that holds you and not just the performance of you, it starts here, by becoming someone your real self is willing to show up as. Vulnerability isn't the risk, staying hidden is.